Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 25th and tonight's movie is Splinter. With a release date of 2008, this is actually the second oldest movie of the entire month. It's a story about this new couple, I guess, or maybe they were newlyweds or something. And they get kidnapped by this convict and they end up in a gas station, but outside there's this horrible apocalypse happening, or maybe it's just localized, with these strange alien monster parasites. They mainly seem to attack by launching needles, or I guess in the movie they're called splinters, and if they hit you with it they possess you, so it's sort of like The Last of Us. I'm very interested in the fact that it starts out with the couple and this convict, they're being enemies, but once push comes to shove and a bigger threat emerges, they have to work together. Seriously, imagine if these three get along better than the four supposed friends did in The Ritual from yesterday. Let me go check it out. I am a little shocked. Not because it's worse than I was expecting. This movie was a lot better than I was expecting. This movie is simplicity done right. I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I want to give it a 10 out of 10, but I don't think it's special enough to get a 10 out of 10. And if I were to give it that score, I think it would just be because there hasn't been a 10 out of 10 so far this Horror Nights, and I want there to be at least one every year. I think I made that same mistake in my classics Horror Nights. The Haunting, while I do like it, I think it's more of a 9 than a 10. But anyway, this movie has a simple premise and it's all about execution. With execution, they did pretty much everything right. The characters work, the story works, the horror works, it all comes together very well. There is a TV term called the bottle episode where they take just basically the core cast of characters and put them in one location and keep them there for, if not all of an episode, a majority of an episode. And this is a good example of a bottle movie. A solid majority of it is spent with 3 characters in this one location. And by the way, the leading actress, the entire movie, I was like, I know her from somewhere. And then I looked it up. She's Jill from Wipeout. Yes, she has done other acting roles, but I'll mostly just know her as Jill from Wipeout. All 3 of the leads did pretty well in their roles. Nothing spectacular, but they absolutely got the job done. There's sort of an element of tactics in this movie. The characters had to analyze the threat, try to learn about it, and figure out the best way to escape. And the threat in question is actually quite a bit like The Last of Us, because I think both of those ideas drew from the same inspiration, which is a type of fungus that parasitizes and seems to reanimate the dead. It's called the zombie ant fungus, and as its name would suggest, it's not really a threat to anything bigger than an insect, but it does sort of reanimate the dead body of an insect and use it as a host. The fungus in this movie is a lot more intense of a version of that. Instead of spores, it uses darts. They call them splinters in the movie, but they're basically needles. And it seems to work that the more splinters you get into you, the faster the infection takes place. But even if you get one little prick and then pull it out immediately, the infection will begin very slowly. That happened to one of the characters in this movie. And the infected hosts contort and their bones crack in very disturbing ways. And what's even scarier is that it doesn't even look like the host needs to be dead for the full possession to happen. The horror and the idea of the horror with the fungus infesting things is pretty good, but I think the best part of Splinter is watching these 3 characters that all have very different skill sets work together to fight this. And strangely enough, I would say that these 3 did get along better than the 4 friends from The Ritual. It started out bad. It started out as a hostage situation, but when push came to shove, they were able to reach an understanding pretty quickly. I wouldn't call Splinter anything truly spectacular or groundbreaking, but if you want a good, short, self-contained horror movie to watch, this is perfect for that. And now I want to talk about some spoilers. The 3 main characters are an escaped convict named Dennis and a husband and wife, or I guess boyfriend and girlfriend, I don't know if they've clarified that, couple, Polly and Seth. Polly is kind of a tomboy type. She knows stuff about cars and camping and stuff, and Seth is a lot nerdier. He's not quite as take charge as Polly is, but he's really smart because I think he's studying for a biology PhD. And the movie starts out with framing Seth as the weak one, the one holding everyone back, but he uses his know-how to help the group several times throughout the movie. And one thing I do appreciate is that while Dennis certainly wasn't very kind to Seth at the beginning of their relationship, there was never, like, gender roles brought up. Like, he never told Seth to, like, man up or anything like that. This movie, I think, is a good example of going against gender roles without drawing any attention to that. Just letting that part speak for itself. While Polly and Dennis are certainly more resourceful and, like, useful in a fight, Seth has a lot more of an analytical slant and is able to help with problem solving. The character that had one prick from a splinter and then slowly had the infection spread across his entire arm was Dennis, and it was because of Seth that they were able to amputate the arm properly. Seth also figured out probably their biggest bit of information about this fungus splinter stuff is that it is completely heat-seeking. It doesn't really see, it doesn't really hear, I don't even think it really smells, it just gravitates towards the warmest thing in the general area. So he makes the plan to, like, use bags of ice to lower his body temperature to the point right before it becomes life-threatening, so he can leave the gas station and go to one of the cars outside. That doesn't end up going as planned because there were no keys in that car and they couldn't use it, but there were guns in that car because it was a cop car. So he brought them back to the gas station and was able to use them to help the other two that were being attacked by the Splinter abomination. And by the way, one interesting thing about it is that these splinters spread along with the infection, and what they do is that they take pieces of bodies and, like, attach them to make a bigger creature. And it doesn't even need a whole body. There were 2 occasions where it was literally just a hand that was, like, crab walking on its own. But anyway, Dennis takes a lot of splinters, enough to the point where there's no saving him anymore, and he decides to sacrifice himself by blowing up the gas station, burning everything while the other 2 are able to go to safety, or at the very least, are able to escape, and at that point the movie ends. Splinter is a great example of a movie that takes a little and gets a lot. It has a simple premise, that has a small cast, that has a limited setting, but it makes a really good movie by having it all executed optimally, or at least mostly optimally. I wasn't wild about the way they tried to turn Dennis into, like, a convict with a heart of gold by the end. I thought that was a little much, but still, it was really good in every respect. I liked it a lot and would recommend it. Okay, thank you for listening. I'll see you tomorrow.